yesterday, President Trump declared that it was, in fact, Liberation Day. His giant tariff policy that he just dropped on the market unilaterally, probably unconstitutionally. Trump's reciprocal tariffs impose hundreds of billions of dollars in new taxes on Americans, be the largest tax increase since the Revenue Act of 1968. One of the biggest tax increases on American consumers in the history of America. And it's going to cost American consumers. It will cost American producers who use inputs from other countries. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted immediately more than 1,000 points. The S&P 500 plummeted more than 3%. The NASDAQ plummeted almost 4.5%. There are real-world implications for this sort of stuff. Trade wars are, in fact, not good and not easy to win, particularly if you don't actually have a plan. It is predicated on a bad idea of how international trade works. A fundamental misunderstanding of trade deficits. Trade deficits they're an accounting procedure. Trade deficits have pretty much nothing to do with the health of an economy. I can name you a period in American history where there was a fairly large surplus in America's balance of trade. The entire Great Depression.
The newest superlib, Ben Shapiro, is railing on Trump's tariff plan. These diehard Trump supporters might want to start masking up because the rapid spread of Trump derangement syndrome that they claimed everyone had when they warned them of how clueless he is has them finally seeing some reality.
What the heck is going on?
Well, I'm let down because yes, I'm not a free trader. I'm a fair trader, always have been from the days when you worked with me at CNBC.
Yep.
And what I was hoping was that a coordinated thing where if you are charging us 20%, we charge you 20%. But I went deep on the numbers today, and the numbers do not make any sense. And I was actually
I was doing like bananas in Vietnam. You did Cramerica.
Well, I just said, it's one of these things where if I'm doing 100 billion and you're letting me do 10 billion and I'm letting you do 100 billion, there was a way to be able to make it work. But the numbers that they did, and they had this ridiculous, that was the chart that they had with the mathematical equation. I mean, are you kidding me? How about just like
it looked like an Einstein.
I know. How about the fact that it was just wrong?
Yeah.
And what bothered me, Aaron, was that they really did over and over again. The president said, "Listen, it's going to be reciprocal. So you do it, we do it, and that was going to be so good." And I really believed in it. And I feel like a sucker tonight. They screwed it up, and they did it a totally ill-advised way. And I was very let down as someone who really, truly believes that free trade is awful for the American working person. This is what they came up with. Jeez, come on, have some gumption, have some math.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what Trump did to these people's brains that made them hear all of the warnings that were based in facts and reality about him, but still ignored them. I get the people still think he's some kind of genius that'll snap his fingers and the world will suddenly do everything he baselessly said that it would do, but they never looked into or considered what was being said because their objective was to promote their king, because they're active subjects that want to be controlled. But these conservatives willing to detail what's wrong never heard the glaring warnings?
I think that the president is undergoing a serious risk factor with this that is going to be felt by all of these Republicans that we've heard from today, including John Kennedy, whose encouraging words were, "Eventually we're all dead," which is not exactly a great thing to run on in terms of a midterm. Look, I hate tariffs. I think they're stupid. I think they're backwards. I don't think that they help the American economy. The president has a different opinion. The president thinks that they do help the American economy, but also that they help American culture, which is something that I think J.D. Vance strongly agrees with him on. That he wants to return manufacturing to the American heartland. He believes that that's something that's achievable, but it takes time. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. And the serious pain that has been inflicted with these tariffs is something that might be short-term, but short-term is relative in terms of the way that you could view it. Short-term for the president is a much different question than for the Republicans who are running in the midterms. And I think that you're going to hear more people who are going to be voicing the same concerns that we heard from Rand Paul and others on Capitol Hill today.
And now they're using words like stupid and backwards. But when Trump was saying stupid and backwards things on the campaign trail, it was considered rude and offensive to his supporters. And there's also no way to win an election. So is anyone going to acknowledge that all that was bullshit deflection?
Being fair, what would you say to the United Kingdom? Or what would you say to Australia, where we have a trade surplus, where they could look at us and say, we're the winners of that competition, and yet we are going to tariff them?
Well, look, they each have the lowest rate available, right? I mean, if you really dissect these the trade numbers that are made publicly, I mean, the United Kingdom, part of their trade surplus is that they have the London Metals Exchange, and they count the importing of bullion. I mean, come on. So, I mean, if you really dissect these things, you realize they have a 20% VAT. Okay, and these things, but they work hard.
So
to
we don't have a trade surplus with them. They're raping us too.
Well, they have a. If you looked at them and really studied it, you'd see they have a goods deficit with us.
It's weird how details and evidence behind the bluster is suddenly something that these anchors are willing to ask for and challenge people like Howard Lutnick about when they give another MAGA-style answer like that. I mean, Ted Cruz even generated a small percentage of a spine on this issue.
So Larry, you know I'm always in favor of more tax cuts and bigger tax cuts, and I'm fighting to make this tax cut as big and bold as possible. Look, I think it is a mistake to assume that we will have high tariffs in perpetuity. I don't think that would be good economic policy. I am not a fan of tariffs. And the announcement yesterday, look, time is going to tell in the next month or two or three what happens. If the result of yesterday's announcement is a lot of our trading partners across the globe dramatically reduce the tariffs they charge on U.S. goods and services, and the consequence of that is the U.S. government dramatically cuts the tariffs that were announced yesterday, that would be a great outcome. That would be good for America. If the result is our trading partners jack up their tariffs and we have high tariffs everywhere, I think that is a bad outcome for America. Tariffs are a tax on consumers, and I'm not a fan of jacking up taxes on American consumers. So my hope is these tariffs are short-lived and they serve as leverage to lower tariffs across the globe.
So you don't want to put any more money, you want to hand any money over to the consumers. The workforce has been hurt by these unfair trading practices.
Cut taxes, cut taxes, cut taxes. I agree with you. I don't know that you could get too aggressive for me in cutting taxes. I just don't want to simultaneously embrace raising taxes on consumers. Right. And so I like half of your idea, but not necessarily the other half.
Ted Cruz, who publicly sacrificed his dignity to Trump for years, can only agree with tax cuts for the wealthy here, passed off as middle-class tax cuts, of course, as the effect of Trump's economic policy kicks in. But, back to Kudlow's call for more tax cuts that they're characterizing as something that'll benefit the middle class. It's important to pay attention to how these rich and connected guys are using this issue, Social Security, Medicare, and government agencies, and the proven fraudulent DOGE promises as excuses to make their self-serving tax cuts even larger. Every time they pass tax cuts, it massively benefits the rich and corporations that they pay them to do that for.
They need massive deregulation. They need to get the Muscovites on steroids in terms of removing barriers to get things done. And the other thing is a huge message to Congress. The GOP needs to really substantially increase this tax cut. Now, they say these tariffs will bring in $600–800 billion of revenue. Use that as an offset for big rates cuts in tax rates, because the economy is going to need real tailwinds.
They don't expect anyone to stop and ask why the glorious tariff plan needs tax cuts to make up for the losses it'll bring about for so many people. And after that money does little to nothing for the people most affected by these tariffs, their heist will be done. So in the meantime, they're hoping and praying that the nonsense numbers that Trump touted on his poster board will be more like negotiating tools rather than actual serious policy.
So you heard the White House there saying, this is not part of a negotiation. This is here to stay. I firmly believe that is posturing. This is the great deal maker, the great negotiator, and he's someone who understands how to get to a good end result. And with that in mind, you set the posture that this isn't going away. These are here to stay. You've had 70 years to negotiate. That's what I think this is. The $6 trillion question, as Politico put it, is what's next. I heard Scott Bessent say, look, we have less to lose than these other countries. If in economic textbooks, we are the deficit country. They are the surplus country. The surplus country has more to lose. What that says to me is he knows these other countries have something to lose. In other words, they're going to be pushed to the negotiating table. Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez for the Bush administration said, I would assume that these will not be in place in a month, 2 months, definitely not the back
Interesting.
half of the year.
Yeah.
I'm in the camp, it's a big negotiation. We'll see what happens, but I would not be surprised if the great negotiator has an end game in mind here.
Yeah, man, the propaganda absolutely never ends. The guy that bankrupted multiple businesses and has lost multiple cases over his fraudulent practices and discriminatory policies is constantly called the great deal maker and the great negotiator by people like Kayleigh McEnany. They know this is a party that appeals to people based on slogans and superhero tags so much, it'll keep their brains from looking at the things that the great negotiator is actually doing and has done that separates him from those unearned titles. So McEnany is probably hoping that there's more to this than this level of tariffs. But really, who knows? Because despite the worship that they give him, he's a repeat failure that doesn't plan things very well. It's given him a freedom to openly flout putting the country up for sale when things like his gold card that you'd find in a board game or a box of Lucky Charms. But watch the stale response that he gets from reporters that aren't paid to kiss his ass.
$5 million. For $5 million, this could be yours. That was the first of the cards. And you know what that card is?
Gold card.
It's the gold card. The Trump card, gold card.
Who's the first buyer?
Me.
Who's the second?
I don't know, but I'm the first buyer. It'll be out in about less than 2 weeks, probably. Pretty exciting, right?
You ready for some questions?
Anybody want to buy one? Okay, let's go.